year and a half ago, I was in my bedroom. I was like, broke or decently well off for my age, right? But still, nothing in my name, no credibility at all, right? And I really credit the stuff I've learned here is as far as like not only just being able to deliver on the results, right? But I have confidence when, like I'm not scared to take over a brand. Like if a brand approaches me, I remember I would be like quivering. Like I was terrified.
What were things like when you got started in this and like how was sort of your experience in getting started in digital marketing and just kind of like tell me the story of what brought you to being aware of what we were doing and how you kind of what that was like and how you found what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, first thing, I'd say for context is I'm actually 20 years old. Right. So I got into this space pretty young back in when I was 15. So I was sophomore, junior in high school. Right. I got into this probably how a lot of people did, at least a lot of young people, at least that I know of, right? Is, we're selling shitty China products on Shopify, we're drop shipping stuff, right? Back then, you looked online, you saw everyone, the Rolexes, Lamborghinis, et cetera, right? My friend at school started it. I'm like, fuck, dude. Like, why? I'm letting him do this. He got like two or three sales, and we were sitting at our lunch table freaking out, right? So, from when I was 15 to 18, that's all I was doing was just drop shipping. I was obsessed with it. I made over 80 Shopify stores. Like, if I log into my Shopify email, I'm scrolling down through. There's just a ridiculous amount, right? Only a tiny fraction of those ever made a profit, right? But I sold a couple hundred K when I was in my junior year of high school, right? So at that point, I knew that, digital marketing was what I wanted to do because, my beliefs kind of got broke because, I just did this off my laptop, right? And ultimately, how I was driving everything was purely through Facebook ads. So, I first started out probably like a lot of people do, go on YouTube, how to run Facebook ads. And, you get hit with the drop shipping gurus of, okay, ABO, 10 different interest groups with 3 different ads. That was like the go-to strategy, right? And so really for my first, 3 years, I was really just relying on, okay, I saw a new YouTube video and like this guy just made a shit ton of money. So I'm just going to copy what he does. Right. And really, I didn't know who to actually listen to because, at that point, I still wasn't even really involved in kind of the D2C space, right? Like not just you, but a lot of these different D2C creators, these big brands. I don't even know if that was really around back then, right? But all the info I was getting was just through these drop shipping gurus selling courses, right? So, I would hop from strategy to strategy on my biggest store. One day I was just like, screw it. I just completely flipped strategies. Everything tanked. I really didn't fully understand and grasp what I was doing. When I turned 18, I got a really good job offer with 2 pretty well-known founders over in Australia, Dave Fogarty and Greta Van Riel. So that's kind of how I entered the kind of
Nice.
brand space, right? And it wasn't just kind of, trying to find winning products off these like product finding softwares and things, right? So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to approach this with a brand building business mentality and not a kind of side hustle, get rich quick mentality, right? So at that point, and at this point too, previously it was just me, right? And I didn't have anyone I had to report to. I didn't really have to show any results to anyone myself besides myself, right? But at that point, I really knew I had to start getting serious about, there's a lot that I don't know. And, that's really when I first set out on trying to find truly what is the best way I can execute this. Right. And, I don't just do, media buying. I'm also involved in creative and landing pages and things like that. Right. But ultimately, I think a lot of this first originally comes down to what are you doing media buying wise, right? Because everything really builds on top of that. I would say, the creative and offer and landing page, like those are like the big variables. But if you don't have if you're just throwing budget around, no structure to it, I don't believe even the best ads that those are going to work, at least at scale, right? So I set off really trying to find, who can I trust? Who is credible? Who's giving out really good info, right? And I was a little bit older, so I was a little bit more mature and was able to kind of see through a lot of the horse shit and everything, right? And then ultimately, I stumbled off on your YouTube channel, right? And I'm not sure what the exact number was, but I remember you having like very, very little subscribers, right? And it's so funny. I've always found like the people with the smallest amounts of subscribers always give out the best info. Like everyone with like hundreds of K are just spewing the generic bullshit. Like use this hook, use, all these different strategies, right? But I'd go to the gym or I'd go on a run and I would just listen to your like definitive guide series, right? Like I think I listened to every single one of your videos at least 4 or 5 times, because every single time I listened to it, I like picked up something. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. Why am I doing it this way? Right. And ultimately I started implementing what you were actually saying. And before I really found you, what I was doing is like probably what a lot of people did at that time. Right. I had a, interest group testing campaign. I had a LOA campaign. I had retargeting. I was trying to test all these different audiences, trying to scale with ABO, trying to do all these hacky things, right? And then ultimately the first thing that really made me trust you the most, and I was completely sold after this, was just broad, right? And a lot of people have accepted that now, especially with like Advantage Plus and all these things rolling out. But even a year and a half ago, this was roughly like a year and a half ago, that was still, at least in like the circles I was in, that was still a pretty controversial thing to just say, just run broad, right? And
I think unfortunately it's still controversial, which is crazy.
Yeah. And I frankly don't understand why, because like the results speak for themselves. Like quite frankly, what I did is I had about 5 or 6 different campaigns with, a bunch of different audiences. I made one campaign, one ad set, no targeting, completely open, threw in my best ads in there, and like the revenue spike that we got was absurd. Like Facebook performance literally doubled in like the first week I did it. And I was like, holy shit, this Charlie guy knows what he's doing. And from there, that's really what sold me. Originally was just broad, right? And because we get in a lot more complex things, right? But originally that was what really drew me into, right? And ultimately, I was with the kind of founders I was working with. Ultimately, I was running 2 ad accounts. Ultimately, I got brought on to 5 before I left them, kind of one by one. As I was taking over, I literally just one campaign, one ad set, threw the best ads in it, and like spiked everything.
Yeah, it's funny how easy that is. Yeah,
and it was like ridiculous, because I'm like, and at this point too, I didn't really have the confidence that I knew what I was doing, right? Because I was still I was 18. I watched this video off of YouTube, and I think I'm giving you my faith off this YouTube video, right? So ultimately, every account I came onto had a different media buyer on it, and I'm looking through these different strategies and things they're doing, and I'm like, there's no way that just throwing this up in one ad set is better than this, right? And every single time it paid off. I remember one brand actually, it was this baby brand. They actually were shutting it down because it wasn't getting the traction that they were looking for out of it, right? And before they brought me on, they had actually like sold a huge amount of units to some like liquidator or something like that. And then we were trying to just move out kind of the last bit of stock to liquidate everything, right? I'd come onto the account, and this is the biggest spike that we saw. The other ones weren't as aggressive, right? But I came onto the account and transitioned it to one campaign, one control ad set, one DCT, and literally like the gross revenue, not Facebook revenue, but like gross on the store went from like 500 a day to like 4,000 or 5,000 in a matter of like 2 weeks. I've never seen something scale that ludicrously, granted, it was still a tiny amount of scale, right? But
10x
on a daily basis,
yeah, 8 to 10x is pretty good. Like that's, yeah, it's not like, hey, look, there's plenty of people out there that would love to get to 2,000 a day, and the fact you went from 500 to 5,000 in like 2 weeks, that's great.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I know. It was probably the most like absurd. Like I just remember coming on and just seeing the results come in, and every day they were getting better. Like every day it just kept climbing, climbing, climbing. And we literally had to like our manufacturer stopped producing that product, and we had just given away like tons of stock, right? So I cleared out stock in like 2 weeks and caused a huge spike, and we couldn't even reorder inventory, right? So that was probably like the biggest waste of potential, I had to sit through because we couldn't get more units. We just sold out of everything. And like ultimately they were running like a number of different brands. So kind of and that one was super, super small. So they were kind of just like, oh, well, it was good, but just cut it. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, so that's really initially what, from that point, I'm like, okay, this guy clearly knows what he's doing. And, just based on your like credentials too, like you probably spent more money than nearly anyone in the D2C space has on Facebook, right?
I mean, when I'm in a room, I talk to folks. It seems that way, I haven't met everybody, but that's what it seems like.
Yeah, and I at that point I still wasn't in the MBA program, right? But I knew.
I mean, that was just the free stuff, which is I want to say that like I feel like I mean now the YouTube channel is really polished and it's beautiful, and I got Eamon and Miguel and like they're crushing. But like those definitive guide videos, like I remember I would hit record, yell at the camera for 30 minutes and then stop. And like I had a timer that was 10-second, it was 10-minute segments. So it was 3 of them. Boom, boom, boom. And like that was it. I get so many comments, people like, why is this guy yelling at me? And then I got like other folks like you and other people we've had do these interviews like Cheyenne and like Andy and Jared and Kelvin. They're all like, that was gold. I just binged that. And I got another guy that we did a video with out of Australia. He was a Uber driver and he's put it on in between all of his rides. And like just the free stuff alone got them to that like 6-7 figures. And like after that was like, okay, well, what else?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, like literally, I would probably watch, 2 or 3 of your like definitive guide videos a day for a number of months, right? Like, and I'd rewatch them because like I wouldn't fully understand everything, and when I was doing this all with the free stuff too, like when I was initially rolling stuff out, I botched it. I botched the DCT strategy, all this different stuff, right? But ultimately, it's really crazy the amount of value that are in those videos, because so many people make content and it's like, these are my 10 best hooks. This is how I source UGC. This is my Facebook ad strategy. And it's like a screenshot of like, a flow chart or something like that. Right. But I don't think anyone else in this entire space talks about how Facebook works on like a fundamental level as much as you do. Like ultimately, I would, watch a broad video, like a definitive guide of broad, or I don't know if that was the title, but something regarding those lines, right? And you would go through thoroughly on saying, look, this is not just like anecdotal experience as far as, I made a bunch of money and this is what I do, right? Because that's what a lot of people really push out. And like, I understand like that makes intuitive sense. And like, I still think there's value in that, right? Like, replicating what others are doing to be successful. But you like, talk about fundamental, like how does the algorithm work with estimated action rate and CPMs and frequency. And it's like, by you conveying that, and then, once I have the understanding of, okay, how is this machine actually functioning? It gives you so much more confidence when you're actually, in the weeds executing things, because I know that I'm using the machine how it's supposed to be used. And it shows, and it's validated with the results I get back, right? But very often now, I'm never in a situation where I don't know what to do, because really I just think, okay, how is the machine working? How am I interpreting the data it's giving me? And then correlating the two, I can kind of diagnose the issue or diagnose where's the opportunity in this to go further, right? And that's really what you get into even deeper, in the MBA program, right? Like you start talking about Golden Bear, and you talk about 4BI analysis, like just free on your YouTube channel, right? But it's like you gain such an understanding of how the algorithm works, unlike literally anyone I've ever spoke to, right? And I think that just comes from your experience of running budgets for such large brands and everything. Is you're in the weeds and you're not like an agency owner managing everything, right?
Yeah.
Because I like ultimately that's like, you know, agency owner, I wouldn't expect one to be a world-class media buyer, right? It's like the
Yeah,
skills you
like
need for
that's
that
not their
are
job.
managing people. Yeah. So, and I think there's, you know, a fundamental issue and even brand owners, right? I think there's a fundamental issue because ultimately, if a brand owner or an agency owner is so hyper specified in like Facebook media buying, right? It's like there's deficiencies elsewhere. So those people at the pinnacle in those positions, just by nature of them having to be more generalized and have their skill set in these other areas, I just don't think are going to be able to deliver the same level of expertise that you can in terms of being in the weeds every single day, media buying, right? And I think there's tremendous value in that. But, you know, ultimately what I would say the value of the MBA program is specifically, right? Because you do get a lot of value for free, just like you post on YouTube, right? And I'd argue that, you know, you could probably get 80-90% of the way there just with like the free content you give out. But you know, I found to be probably the most valuable resource that like I frankly ever have is really what you talk about in the lectures and like you post in the Facebook groups, right? Because once you really what you preach, right, is simplifying the machine, using the machine how it's supposed to be used, right? And then at that point, how you actually grow the business and actually impact change is working on business development, right? So you talk about LTV, you talk about PSM, you talk about these like very sophisticated, like professional strategies that there it's not some cost cap or interest group like
Oh,
you know this is going to raise your ROAS by 50%,
yeah.
right?
Like I had
And
a conversation with some folks today, and like we were on our second one-on-one, you know, because when you join the MBA, you have the option of getting some one-on-ones if you want it and all of that stuff. And I think everybody loves those times. I mean, I do. And like we realized we're 2 hours in to like one-on-one time. And we spent about 8 minutes on what buttons to push in the platform. And we started like, there's this woman, Ella, and she laughed and she's like, so none of this matters. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, the audience. I'm like, no, the cost caps, that's not going to fix this problem. Like, no, that has, she's like, yeah, it's going to get in the way. Like, it's, I love seeing the light bulb moment go off where like we literally spent almost 2 hours talking about business model, funnel development, the stabilization of the front end of the business. And like that has 5-10x what they're doing in 5-6 weeks, which I mean, hey, look, you got it in 2 weeks. It took them 6, like whatever. Like it's awesome to see. And I love that because I still feel like so many people are so heavily focused on all of the surface level shit that legitimately gets in the way of actually being successful. And it's so funny you say that. Like every new person that comes in, they have that aha moment when they're like, wait, audiences don't matter. Cost caps, that's a problem. Creative testing, a shit ton of things. Like, oh no, that's actually that's getting in the way of being successful. Like running all of these offers, all of these things that everybody tells you you're supposed to do, all of them get in the way of actually building a successful business. They just make the ad account. I think people are taught to look busy and to provide value.
yeah.
And like what you did with Fogarty and like the 5 brands, all you did was like, well, this strategy works and this crazy person on the internet, I'm just going to take the best ads, put them in abroad and let it go. And look at that, it beat everything. And now I'm running 5 brands and it takes you like 0 time. I keep telling people, like, if you're spending more than an hour a week on your ad account, you're doing more harm than good, almost assuredly.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of conflict there because I know you in like a lot of circles and like the DC space stuff. It's like you're quite like abrasive and things, or like on Twitter, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be nice, but sometimes like me being nice attacks people's core values, and I get that.
Yeah, and I mean, like ultimately, there probably is multiple ways you can run Facebook and can be successful, right? And I think a lot of that comes from just these are people who've done this for so long, right? And it's like there's so many conflicting points of view, right? But like ultimately, I think I've tried a number of things. Like I'm always a big believer in not just following what any specific person teaches or even what I believe to be the best thing. I'm always a believer believer in, okay, I need to validate it for myself, right? And I need to see for myself as proof, as, even just like a learning process, right? That I can prove to myself and show that, this is the optimal way to run it, right? And ultimately, this is what I've landed on, like the exact, methodology that you teach, right? And, in certain circumstances, I think, some things could be leaned into in some cases, but there's obviously outlying reasons like that, right?
Sure.
But ultimately, specifically like the Facebook process of, it's very kind of cut and dry that this is the most optimal way to run it, in my opinion, right? And it's bizarre because, I think a lot of people who don't know you too, they're like, well, it can't just be as simple as just one campaign, one broad ad set, right? And like, obviously there is more complexity, like with like control campaigns and Golden Bear and things, right? But ultimately that's the base of that account. And like really, I think those people just need to try it. And I think like ultimately in my experience from every account that I've transitioned, the results have spoke for themselves, right? And when you simplify the machine like that, like kind of back to what I was saying about talking about these like more complex topics like incrementality and PSM and how to grow LTV and like Facebook's impact on email and Google. It's like, once you're out of the weeds of like, is a 1% purchase look like or a 3% add to cart look like in a performance, like once you're out of that, the scope of what you can do is so much greater, right? And like ultimately what I've kind of done is, at first I was kind of going down like an agency route and things like that, but I ultimately decided it's like, I really have a passion for doing the work itself, right? So right now I'm kind of working as a fractional head of growth for a couple of different, and being able to like, I know that, okay, this is how we're media buying on Facebook, right? This is the most optimal way to do it. And it's very, very simple, right? So now that I have that foundation, I can build on top of that with so many more of these complexities that we talk about. Like quite frankly, before I joined the MBA program, I had, no idea about even like the concept of incrementality or like that, the numbers Facebook was showing me weren't accurate. Like it wasn't even something I thought about, right? I didn't even know I was doing it wrong because like my, the 3.5 years I was running Facebook prior to that, it was just a given, right? It was just a given. I look at Facebook, this is what the results are. And, really, I think the value of what you can do on a business and like, frankly, like reflective in, how I work now is you're so much more valuable being able to have impact in those higher leverage areas and actually being able to have insight, right? And what I think the program has done for me specifically is like, it's taught me things that frankly, I probably should have no business knowing with the amount of experience and like the age I have, right? Because like for incrementality, I wouldn't even have thought of that, right? Like it wasn't even something that was on my radar. And there's a million different things like that in a program that you jump into, right? And it's like every different lecture I watch, like I'm usually not on the live, but I usually watch them all in the group afterwards, right? And every single time, like quite frankly, literally every lecture teaches me something that I could use, right? And it's like you're pumping these out on a weekly basis. And like ultimately,